All right, welcome everybody. My name is Seve Ponce de Leon, and will be presenting today on the future of schedule summarization using GPM. Here I am. I'm a senior director here at PMA. I've been working with product management on the innovation and software side for over 10 years here. That was quite a presentation from Dr. Guy, tough act to follow. Lots of very interesting information, but I'll do my best here. Here's our agenda for today. I'll zoom a little bit out, just talk quickly about us at PMA, Netpoint, which most of you probably know and love, before we transition into Project Summit. We'll do a live demo in this new solution, and then transition to talking about what the future looks like with this new paradigm and approach. I wanted to start off with a couple quotes that I really like about planning, scheduling. This one was from one of my favorite authors, Mark Twain. And I read this back in 2008. I was on a trip at that time, starting in Australia, going through over 20 countries with my brother. And I remember that before we left, we made very detailed plans for where we were going, when. It's our first big trip. And we found out, within days of arriving, how all those plans were made very worthless very quickly by things that we didn't plan for, like as simple as rain or transportation. And I think if you guys have traveled and done anything like this, you can relate. And this quote has stuck with me ever since. And then here's another one, probably more well known for the audience. And I like the story behind it. It's interesting. Eisenhower, he was, this was in a speech in 1957. Then he was president. He was talking about the maps that the US military was using in their graduate school programs. They used to be from a region in what is present day France. And they decided to switch to use maps based on the US. They thought this would make more sense, be a little bit more relevant. And then a couple years later, the US was drawn into World War I and actually deployed to that exact same region in the maps they used to use that they switched away from. And this is when he made his quote, "Plans are worthless, but planning is everything." His point with this anecdote and during the speech was, and I quote, "Planning keeps you steeped in the character of the problem that you may one day be called upon to solve." So, in other words, even though a plan that we come up with, whether it's in the military or a project that we're working on, has to be thrown out, just by doing that act of planning, we'll be much more ready to switch gears because we will be much more familiar with all of the details. So, who are we? PMA was the company behind Netpoint and NetRisk. Founded in 1971, family owned. We have over 20 offices around the US and Canada. We do project management, project controls, scheduling, claims, risk management. We've been doing this for decades. We have over 150 schedulers actually in the company, over half of which are certified PMPs, about a dozen risk analysts. And I bring this up because it's all of these great people who I work with, plus hundreds of you, customers, who help us fine tune and evolve our products. And that brings us to Netpoint. Over 100 customers love Netpoint for doing real-time planning on summary level schedules. They love this network style diagram where you can put multiple activities on a row, overlaid on top of this graph of the timescale. The ability to add in logic and model precedence relationships, trace the critical path, even put in resources and be able to level resources in the schedule. Most of all, they love this ability to actually push and interact with the network in real time, try out different scenarios. If you've used Netpoint for any of this, it's unbeatable when it comes to planning out a project like this from scratch at a high level of detail. And actually, yesterday, Nick Gendron gave an excellent example of this. And if you didn't catch that, the recording will be up on our website. It was called "Using Netpoint as a Last Planner Tool," and he showed a very good use case for using Netpoint like this. But what about if you didn't start off your project or your plan in Netpoint and you already have a big detailed schedule? Imagine you're on a mega project. It's falling behind schedule. You got to get the whole project team, non-schedulers together, engage in some replanning, recovery, and try out some different what-if scenarios. This is a scenario that comes up fairly often. 9 times out of 10, our schedulers here at PMA, our software customers, they'll do this on a summary level schedule, because then the whole project team, other stakeholders, executives, non-schedulers, will all be able to have a seat at the table, actually follow along with the changes to the project. Summarizing like this it's much more helpful for many more scenarios than just this type of what if analysis recovery scenario. Things like monthly progress reports, risk assessments, right? Building a risk model, delay analysis, a lot of these scenarios. So how do we do this actually? And I'm going to talk very quickly about 3 options. Okay. The first is write on the detailed schedule. If you're using a tool like P6, then write in there using different activity types. 2, you could import it into Netpoint and use something like a hammock, or 3, you could rebuild it in Netpoint at summary level. So let's look at each of these quickly. This is option number 1, right? Integrated with the detailed schedule. So most often this is done using WS summaries, levels of effort. I'm showing you a very simple graphic here, showing you, here we go, some WS summaries and LOEs. This is not, a full summary, actual summary layout, but just to show you, for those of you who are familiar, you've done this, this is what it looks like. If your goal is summarizing, then there's a couple drawbacks to using these activity types. First of all, they were not designed to be actually linked together to create a summary level schedule. Actually, to get this big picture, you have to filter out all of the detailed activities and the rest of the schedule. And when you do that, all the logic between all the underlying activities is going to disappear. So what you're left with is this high-level bar chart, which doesn't really cut it when you're looking to do, interactive replanning or what-if analysis. Secondly, to actually change dates or durations or try different scenarios, you have to bring all that detail back, because you actually have to change that and then reschedule to update your WS summaries or your LOEs. So then you're losing that big picture view, which was why you underwent the summarization in the first place. So it's not ideal. Option 2, you could import into Netpoint and use hammocks. The sweet spot in Netpoint, as you've heard or you've tried, is really around 300 activities. This is what it was built for: level 1, level 2 schedules. You can technically import up to 1,000, 2,000, as you've heard, but it will become unworkable eventually. So, speed becomes an issue. Second, some things like P6 aren't supported or are different or handled differently in Netpoint, like calendar exceptions, negative lags on start-to-start links, or nonlinear distributions for resources, constraints. These are what John Zan talked about yesterday in his presentation, what he called, I think, the fundamental differences between the two, things to be aware of if you're importing and exporting between. His session was called Construction Project Control Techniques Using Netpoint and P6. So if you didn't miss it, you can check the recording. He goes into actually how to do this process. So for our purposes, just know Netpoint will convert these on the import, which means you could end up with unwanted changes if you're trying to send it back to P6 and update your actual schedule. You could not send them back to P6, but then that means any changes you do in Netpoint, you have to redo it in P6. So hence the duplicate work. So Logic, non-existent or manual. Again, just like P6, these hammocks in Netpoint, they're not really designed or to be interactively modified. They don't have logic connected between them. You can't manipulate them. You have to do that on the detail. So, despite all these drawbacks, still, it's been a common use case. And finally, rebuilding in Netpoint, huge improvement over the first two options I just talked about, because now you can grab things, move them around in real time. Still a couple drawbacks. It's time consuming, and we can use something like Excel to speed it up, but it's still going to take a while, depending on activities, schedule quality you're starting with. It's taken us anywhere from half a day to multiple days to really dig in, understand the detail, rebuild it in Netpoint and have it match. Two, you're breaking any chance for vertical integration. You've got your detailed execution schedule in one application and your summary in another one, and they're not connected anymore. So duplicate work. If you make any changes, then you have to go rekey them in the other tool and vice versa. If you're looking to maintain them in sync throughout the project. And all of this manual work just means there's opportunities for errors to creep in, as is the case when you're doing anything that's very manual like this. And think about doing this every month for a progress update, where every time you need to do a what if analysis, then these drawbacks start to compound. None of these solutions are perfect, which is what brings us here today. And here's a presentation from our own Reniz Musa at the 2019 Netpoint GPM conference. He did an entire presentation on how to summarize a detailed XER file. He was using the last option, rebuilding it in Netpoint. There have been a lot of presentations over the years from PMAers, from customers about how to summarize, use Netpoint to summarize, and culminating last year in our keynote schedule density zooming, where we laid out a new approach for achieving this. So today, I'll be showing you an advancement, a replacement, the future for an alternative, in other words, for these three options, and how it's going to make summarizing get a whole lot better. So that brings us to Project Summit. We started this with that need in mind: reduce the time and effort to summarize a large detailed schedule. We wanted to focus on vertical integration. So no longer separate the summary from the detail. So we knew we were going to grab the whole schedule, not just a section of it. So we went with today the XER file. It's still used much more frequently with our customers than the XMLs. But we haven't ruled off a direct connection to something like the database, a P6 database for future development. We also knew speed was incredibly important. Importing, loading, just scrolling around the schedule had to be brilliantly fast. For all of this to work, our customers had to spend less time fine-tuning, tweaking, the layouts, the descriptions, the timescales, because we're going to have so many more activities that doing that type of customization on 50 activities in Netpoint, not a big deal, but on 500 or 5,000 could get prohibitive. And finally, we're starting off on the desktop, but we wanted to keep the doors open to real-time collaboration in the future. So the technology we've chosen will be conducive to the web. So none of this is really that innovative. The real differentiator, I should say, is how we actually do the summarization using the graphical path method. So I'm almost to the part where I'm going to open up the application, show you a live demo. But I'd like to show you a couple slides with a simple example, just so you understand what we're talking about. Here we have two very simple fragnets. The first one has a mix of critical and two non-critical activities. And connecting the two fragments, these two groups of activities, is a finish to start relationship. Now, when we zoom out on this, watch how these 5 activities will be substituted by 2 summary level activities. You can look in the upper right for the original network as I go through these differences. So you'll notice right away there's a period of non-work actually being displayed on the summary level. You'll also notice the critical path is maintained on the summaries, and it follows the criticality of the underlying activities. This is all possible because logic has actually been propagated up automatically. In this case, there was a finish to start. It's now a start to start with a lag. And if you use Netpoint, you know that this little yellow dot is called an embedded node, and it makes tracing these start to start or finish to finish links much easier and intuitive for stakeholders and maybe non-schedulers who might be looking at any schedule graph. Overall, this is called not just vertical, but horizontal integration. And it's thanks to this patent pending logic summarization that takes place. So in the end, you get an actual summary network, not just a bar chart. It's still built on top of all the detail, and it's still connected to all of the detail. And this process where we summarize up, we call density zooming or zooming out on the schedule, because as you do it, the activity density reduces with the time scale. So there's a few ways to actually do this in the software, and I'll be showing you that right now as we kickstart the demo. So here I have Project Summit. I'll go ahead and maximize the window. I'd like to start by bringing in what would be a pretty big sized XER file, certainly for Netpoint. It's got about 2,000 activities. I'd just like to demonstrate some of the speed that I was mentioning with importing. And what I'd like to do is import, lay out the schedule into swim lanes using the work breakdown structure. This is a scenario that is probably going to be very familiar with a lot of you if you've imported into Netpoint before. So as I do this, just watch. I'd like you to pay attention to how long this takes as I'm going through the steps. So I'll select my XER file, and I'll go ahead and click open. And in less than 3 seconds, it's done. Now in P6, depending on if you're bringing in a lot of the background information, different tables, this could take, best case scenario, a minute, worst case, 15 minutes. In Netpoint, probably between 10, 15 minutes as well. We can do this because we take all we need from that XER file to draw and display the schedule. And then after I click OK, as we display the graphic, now we start saving to the database in the background, which we use a technique in software engineering to do that. So we can dive right into the schedule, start to look at it instantly. There's no waiting. There's, when you receive a big XER file, maybe from a contractor or a client, and it makes all the difference. You'll notice it's a very clean, minimal design here. As we look at the schedule on the left, we have the swim lanes that I mentioned. You can see different colors used on the WBS swim lanes, but it's subtle. It shows you which level you're at, but it doesn't cover up too much of the canvas. I also have these numbers on the left for the grid numbers of the rows. I can grab and stretch those to increase or decrease the height. And as I move up to the top, you'll see the same idea up with the timeline. Very clean, easy to read. And I can just click and drag if I want to, stretch to the right or to the left to zoom in or zoom out. So let's bring in a little bit more time into my view here. We start to see some activities. And as I pan or scroll around, I don't know, I'm broadcasting from Europe. I'm going through Zoom through all these different applications. But on my computer, there is no delay. I hope that transfers through to the web session. But if not, it's extremely snappy as I move, move my mouse around. You also notice the swim lane sticks there to the top, as does the year. So even if I move over, I still know I'm in 2014. Even if I move down, design and investigation sticks there to the top. Here I can bring some activities in view, so I can move around really fast. Again, there's no delay, and this is over 2,000 activities. I just want to emphasize. Speed, if you're used to that being a handicap in Netpoint, that's not going to be an issue here in Project Summit. So let's jump back to the home screen. I'll go ahead and grab another schedule. In this case, you see a look at the database here. Well, the home screen, as I mentioned in the presentation, we do use a database in the back to store all the data. So there's a very, capable, robust solution behind all these XCR files that you're going to be, importing into your application. No more messing with, files or project folders. So I'd like to bring in another XCR file. It's it's a little smaller, 500, still big for Netpoint, but it's got some nice examples in it that I'd like to focus on. I'll go ahead and import this in. You can see it's even quicker. And what I'd like to do in this session, the goal is I'd like to summarize and get this on one page, which is another scenario many of you have probably tried to do. So keep that in the back of your mind as I'm going through the demo and how we're achieving that result. As I pan over here, you'll notice I see some milestone. Notice to proceed, some links. You'll notice right away there's a new link design if you're used to Netpoint. It's very clear, an arrow emanating out and a line. And as an arrow comes in or out of an activity, as a link comes in or out of an activity, you'll also see a single arrow. But it's more than that. If I scroll and to the point where no predecessor or successor is showing up anymore, you'll notice these links fade and get lighter right now. And that's so, if I just go back and forth, you can see, so the amount of clutter is reduced and it's less distracting because again, we're dealing with potentially hundreds or thousands of logic lines. So let me jump out, to June and I'll go scroll down to an area of the schedule that I'd like to focus on. You'll see as I'm scrolling through a lot of activities, there's some red ones, some green ones. The red ones are default criticality, total float less than 0. The green are above 10. And here, this orange section is anything with total float between 0 and 10 days. And these are just presets, but the user would eventually be able to customize these. So here you can see a nice section of activities. And I want you to look at the logic lines again. Here, coming out of install MVP trim, we have a link coming down. It actually jumps over, it breaks the description over the description for install field, and then continues on down to final paint. And that's so that you can actually read the description all the time. And we know that because if we hover the mouse over here, over this link quickly, see if I can bring this up. Finish to start from install MVP trim to final paint. And so you can see that arrow coming in down. So these shapes actually chosen are done by what we call auto link. When you import the schedule, it lays out all of the activities in a logical format. It lays out all the links so that it looks good. You don't have to think about the geometries or how to place them. The other thing I'd like you to focus on are the descriptions themselves. So here you see install wall-mounted devices and trim. It's been wrapped on the bar because it didn't have enough room. We don't want it to run outside the bar and run into other activities. Conversely, if I stretch out and actually get more space, you'll see that updates in real time. And when I shrink it down and it runs out of room, then it wraps for us. And if you get into a scenario where you can't read it, you can just hover your mouse over, like here, apply primer, and it'll show you, in a tooltip. So I'd like to jump us over. This is all things to what we call auto grid, auto link, auto text. All of this is happening behind the scenes so that the user doesn't have to think about it. I'd like to show a couple more features down here. I'm going to jump to the end of the schedule. Here we are, our substantial completion milestone. This is a scenario that might come up often where you'd like to import and start tracing a float path, see what's driving it, see what's going on. So for that, I'll select the milestone on the canvas and I'll bring up our table. Here we can see a list of any predecessors, any successors, how much float they have when they're starting and finishing. But I can do one better. I can go ahead and turn on our tracing mode, and that'll allow us to just highlight the driving logic. So as I do that, I'm going to go ahead and click this icon, just draw your eyes to the canvas. And there you'll see everything not on that path fade out. So now I see a really great picture of what is driving. And I can start to step one by one through that chain. So, although I see the whole list here, all I need to do is click this little left arrow if I want to go backwards. And if you watch the canvas, I've gone down. Now I've gone left, now I've gone up, and I'm stepping one by one to predecessors that are earlier up that flow path. These lists, they're sorted by default by drivers. So you're starting at the top of the list with drivers with no float, or at least float, or most driving. So that allows you to just quickly step through. But if you want to change, you want to look at a different path, you can select a new activity on the canvas. You can choose a different row. Just a very nice feature for tracing logic that we're really excited to see. How you guys use it. So I'll scroll back up. Let's see here. We're on grid 211. Thanks to those grid numbers, I know exactly where to go here. And I got to go back to June. I want to bring back those activities. Here we go. So let's talk about summarizing, right? That's where we started off. I got distracted, excited with some of these other features, but so what we can do is start to picture, how do we want to get it on one page? Well, we got to reduce the number of activities we have. So one tool available to us is we can just drag and select a group of activities like this. We can go ahead and click summarize. Now that's what I just showed you in the PowerPoint here. It kept the logic coming in and out of any of those activities. Not all of the links, but the ones that are most important to actually maintaining the float and the schedule. And it picked one coming out to a successor. You'll see it renamed the description. It just combined all of the activities. So actually you still know what it just summarized. You can click in here and you can edit it if you want. But that starts to give you that ability to start to reduce the amount of information. But we can do better. We can actually summarize all of finishes. If we just come over here to the WBS and we go ahead and click minus. Now you'll see our detail was just replaced by a single summary bar. It's showing non-work. It tells us its finishes named after WBS. You can rename that if you want. And it's keeping the logic coming in and out. We can do the same for interior build out, area D corridor. You can start to summarize up one by one. So still quicker. I'll show you another tool that's nice. And that I'll just switch to the panhand and press D on my keyboard. It's a shortcut. And this lets you do it automatically based on your timeline. So as I click and move to the left, it's doing what we're calling density zooming. It's zooming out on the timeline, but it's also merging activities in those swim lanes for us automatically because there's not enough space in the timeline to show those. So here you see MEP, interior build out. Just to emphasize, if I go the other way, I zoom back in, you'll see these eventually pop back out into their detail right there. And now if I go backwards again, I zoom out, you'll see they'll start to be replaced. So very interesting to be able to navigate and start to zoom out and start to get more of that big picture. But let's keep going. If I know right away, my WBS, it's built really well. I know how I want to summarize this. Let's just go up to level 2, level 1. I can come up here to the top. And here we see all the swim lanes or WBS levels. I'll go ahead, let's start with level 2, and it will wholesale summarize the entire schedule to level 2. I can grab the timeline, start to shrink it over to the left so we can fit it all in. Almost there. There we go. We start to see the end of the schedule, but it's still not on one page vertically. Let's go up to level 1. And now we're getting closer. So now we can see everything on my monitor here. The entire schedule we just rolled up in a sense, or zoomed out and summarized into a summary network, right? Logically linked between all these activities, not just a bar chart, not just a static picture. This is 2 years of schedule, right? On one page. No waterfall. We're using the Netpoint ability to display activities on multiple grids to really give you that condensed layout. There may be scenarios where your WBS is not built for this. Maybe you put in codes to facilitate this process. If that's the case, you can come lay out by activity code. Here I have one called area. We can just change our swim lane, organization by area. I'll go ahead and click that. You'll see the whole schedule is reorganized by area code. I'll roll it up again to level 1. And now you see a similar type of summarization, but now it's based on area code. So extremely helpful for other scenarios when coding comes into play. Let me switch back to WBS. And I'm going to show you one more way to quickly summarize this up. And that's just right-clicking anywhere on this canvas and clicking Zoom to fit. And here, instead of maybe by level or by lane, it's going to do a job to just fit on the one page or onto your screen. In this case, it's pretty similar to what we had before, but very handy if you open it up and you want to quickly get that high-level look and you don't know how. Maybe it's WBS, maybe it's merging. You could try this, see what it gives you, and you could start drilling down. You could open up some of these lanes, go drill down lane by lane, collapse them back up, merge. And all of this, although I can't show you today, but it's in progress right now. You'll be able to save as different layouts. So you save this view as one layout. The view you started off when you imported as one layout, and you'll be able to switch between them with a click of a button. So I have one more feature I'd like to show you. Let me just move my Zoom controls out of the way here. Just one more thing before we go. And sometimes, we're working with a project or a schedule very long, or it has, just some activities which are very long, some which are very short. And it's hard to get it on the one page, or if you do, it's hard to control, the durations and how they're displaying. So for this, I'm going to go ahead and right-click. In this case, next to the date. Here you see I have a big portion of the schedule already completed. I could filter that out, but in this case, I'd still like to keep it. I'd like to show that there's progress going on. So I'll come right up next to the date, and I'll right-click, and we'll add what we call a timescale split or a window. Now, what that's done is it's divided the canvas into two sections. So if I come up to my timeline and I zoom out, just like we were doing earlier, you'll actually notice that only the left side of that line is condensing down. The right side, you see, is actually the same. So on the left, we've zoomed out to quarters, and on the right, we're still looking at months. That's another feature that as you zoom in or out the timeline, it's going to automatically show you which time units are most relevant to the scale you've got. So now we can, on the right side of that, we can click and we can drag to the right. And now we can stretch out just that remaining portion of our schedule. So huge for trying to summarize and get things onto one page. But we can do one better. Maybe we're doing just a rolling rate planning. What if only the next month or two are important to us? So we can come put another split over here. Let's say in July at a 2-month time period. You can add another split. And let's collapse down again the portion on the right. So if I click that, move to the left, you'll see it move down. And now we just have this upcoming rolling window that we're interested in, and we can take that, we can stretch it out to really fit the majority of our page. All right, stop right there. Huge for, again, trying to fit on page and then go to print to a PDF or present. You can hover your mouse over the line. You can see I put this on, it looks like July 10th, actually. Maybe I wanted to include our milestone in here. So I can just click, I can drag it to the other side of our milestone. So, any one of these splits, you can adjust it, move it around, see what date it was at. A huge game changer when it comes to printing. And what I can say about printing is that it's not going to be tied to the printer like you may be used to in Netpoint. There's no dependency. So you're going to be able to take this, send it to print, and have it print really exactly how you see it and how you need it. So just a couple slides here. I want to leave some time for questions in case any are coming in. I'm not even looking yet up at the window, but I know Zoe is managing those for me. So before I go further, I just want to reemphasize the enormous potential of this timescale split window functionality that I just showed you. Only one or two other tools even offer something similar to this that we've seen, and no one makes it so easy intuitive, and flexible as I've just showed you here in Project Summit. And we think it's going to make a huge difference when it comes to building your summary schedules. And we're really looking forward to seeing how you use them. Overall, I've shown you a number of features in Project Summit, solutions to help you build these summaries faster, like importing, scrolling around, no more lag or concern about activity count or schedule size. Faster ability to lay out in the text and the link shapes and make the schedule readable and look good. The automatic logic summarization, which as you roll up, you don't even have to think about mirroring the logic of the schedule at the detail level. Really improved quicker logic tracing, where in P6 to do something comparable would take multiple steps to be able to find that driving path highlighted on the schedule on the Gantt chart, and then step through it without worrying about any of the other detail. It's made possible here in just a couple steps. And finally, the timescale splits and the windows. So how do we see this fitting in our workflow, and also taking into account the keynote from just before my session? In the next year, we'll continue to use Netpoint and GPM upfront to build our level 1 and level 2 schedules collaboratively, as we have always been doing for those of you out there using Netpoint, with executives, with senior stakeholders. Think again, the presentation from Nick Gendron, doing pull planning, right? Perfect scenario. But little by little, taking into account these highly predictable schedules that we saw from our keynote, starting to request that reference class data, think about early completion and build it into our upfront high-level schedule. Next, we'll send that to NetRisk. That's when we'll do our detailed quantitative schedule or cost risk analysis. We need to find our probabilistic completion date, not just our deterministic completion date, as well as the amount of float that we can actually use on the project without risking that completion date. This is actually in a probabilistic world, it's called safe float, and it's an eye opener once you start seeing and using those numbers as opposed to just total float. So in this short term, we'll continue to send out to P6 to detail out the schedule to level 3 or level 4. Think about John Zan's presentation where he showed you how to do that. Really maximize the export going from Netpoint to P6. Once we get to the point where we have the detailed schedule and we need to visualize or analyze or report or do these what-if scenarios, that's when we'll leverage this visual, interactive, vertical, horizontal integration that I just demoed for you in Project Summit. And then as the project progresses, we can make these updates only in one place, but in either one, whichever one is suiting our team and our technology better, and sending those updates the other way. So you don't have to actually make them in both tools. And last but not least, we can always monitor the reliability or the quality at any point using Schedule MD, the built-in DCMA 14-point assessment. It's easy as just importing the XCR file and running a report. So how do we get there? In the next couple of months, we're working on the printing that I mentioned, that you've always dreamed of for Netpoint. Really flexible, easy, take that schedule that you've spent your time to generate in the tool and then just get it on one piece of paper for a PDF. Plus updating, just taking a new XCR file from P6 and pushing it in Project Summit, as I mentioned. So if you're executing actually in P6, you're only making all those changes in one place so you can keep everything in sync. At the end of the summer, I jumped the gun here, then you'll see the real-time interactivity from Netpoint that you're used to for doing these truly integrated what-if scenarios and then sending those revisions back to P6. And then further out on the horizon, that ability to detail out a high-level plan, from that you may have done in Netpoint into a vertically, horizontally integrated execution schedule, all in Project Summit, from where you'll actually have the ability to track that as-built data in a robust solution. So before I go, I want to leave you with just some closing thoughts. We've all been watching, for those of you active in the project controls community, construction on LinkedIn, following different solutions. Big data, machine learning are taking off in construction applications, desktop solutions, web solutions. They're helping us do things like automation, analytics for project reporting, optimization using AI, risk or forecasting in general on the projects. And if you caught the keynote before this from Dr. Gee about highly predictable schedules, then you have undoubtedly recognized opportunities for us, our very own software, to be incorporating this. But that doesn't mean that the algorithms or the software is going to take over or replace us. In this future at PMA, we still believe our role is going to be more important than ever as humans, and collaborative intelligence is the way forward. Using the algorithms to give us the data, but us interpreting and explaining that. So the question that we have is, how can we help our customers, our software users, understand the data that we're seeing and use it better to execute the project? And our answer is having the most clear, intuitive, visual representation of the schedule as possible. For us, seeing is planning. That's been our tagline for over a decade now with Netpoint. And planning, as I mentioned earlier, is everything. So our vision is for every stakeholder to see this plan clearly. Last but not least, presenting today was certainly a privilege, but Project Summit wouldn't be here without the hard work of the entire development team. So I just want to congratulate all of you for helping us bring this to reality. We still have a little bit of time for questions. I know we've thrown a lot at you between the keynote, between this, but I'll do my best to answer any questions that come up.
Sure, we have quite a few questions. So our first question is, how are different activity types considered in the summarization? Are there ways to filter out some activity types?
Good question. So right now, what I'm showing you, we actually don't consider any of those activity types that I mentioned. LOEs, WBS summaries, summary bars that you might have in P6. We don't bring them in and display them yet. The idea is Project Summit generates those for you automatically on the fly. I actually, I didn't emphasize that in the presentation. Furthermore, that file that I imported, it didn't even have any LOEs or summaries or anything in it. It was done all for you automatically. That's where we are today. We get in scenarios where we do need to bring those in to display them. That's something we can do. We really focus just reading on the milestones, the task dependence, to give you the look of the schedule and then summarize it in Project Summit.
Okay, the next question is, can you import and export Excel data and or Microsoft project schedule data?
Good question. Not yet, but it's in our roadmap as well. Microsoft project is actually coming up in the next couple of months. And Excel will undoubtedly play an important role in Project Summit the same way it has for Netpoint. Right now, in the demo that I'm showing you, we're just importing P6. It's still where the vast majority of our customers and our PMA colleagues are executing the projects. But we've got a lot of requests for for Microsoft project as well. So.
Okay, the next question is, does that development roadmap intend to provide the functionality to edit Summit activities or logic?
Yes, yeah. That's exactly, if I could maybe step back. Where was I? Right here, the real-time interactivity, that's editing the schedule just like you do in Netpoint. It could be clicking and dragging, the dates, the durations, changing the activities, and then sending them back to P6. Yep.
Okay, the next question. Will Summit allow a user to export an XDR file of the new, never before existed summarized network so that it can live on in P6 or Netpoint?
Yep. So once we get to right here, sending back to P6, that's what we'll be looking at this summer, exactly how that happens. There could be scenarios where you do want to send out that summarized version to P6 instead of the detailed version. There could be reasons to send out the summarized version to NetRisk to run a risk analysis on your summary model, or to Netpoint to take advantage of some of Netpoint's unique functionality not in Project Summit yet. So that we'll be looking at those scenarios then.
This is more of a general question. How do you see Summit working alongside Netpoint?
Sure, yeah. So for that, I'd jump us back to this workflow that I showed right here. At least the short term, Netpoint is going to play a crucial role. We're still building out from scratch. Think pull planning from Nick Gendron, interactive planning sessions, kicking off our project, starting that level 1, level 2 look at your project, and then think importing. If you've already got that detailed schedule, very big, too big for Netpoint, you need to summarize it, then Project Summit is going to be the better solution for a use case like that.
Okay, the next question. How are the descriptions produced in the level 1 schedule? They seem to be no longer concatenated or linked.
Yeah, you notice that very astutely. In the level 1 schedule, if I can get back to right back here. In this case, it's just defaulting it to our swim lane names. So it's taking a best guess and knowing that, for example, this entire summary activity was in a swim lane called procurement. So it's taking, when it summarizes it up, it's taking the swim lane name and putting that. But at the end of the day, you can double click, you can rename it, you'll have control over. This is just a starting point so that you can get still a digestible look at the schedule. Good question.
Okay, I believe this is our last question. In yesterday's session, Construction Project Control Techniques using Netpoint and P6 by John Zan, he explained the automated Netpoint reports that are generated when importing from P6 to Netpoint. How does Summit process these details when creating a file?
Yeah, thanks for that question as well. Exactly the same as the XCR. So we don't spit out a report today because there's nothing to report. Everything that was in the XCR file comes in untouched for Project Summit. The idea here is that if you're going to send this back to P6, you're going to be summarizing, executing a project. We're trying to maintain maximum compatibility, minimum data conversion going on. So that's our strategy moving forward as we get to even past importing, modifying this, sending it back to P6. That's what's driving how we're handling that in Project Summit.
Great, thank you so much.
All right, well, for any more information, you can sign up on our website. As further releases get made available, we will have, for all the conference attendees, a pre-release beta trial copy available later quarter 3. And we are eyeing then Q4 for a commercial version to be available on our website. So thank you, everybody.